The Veltar had perfected death down to the millisecond. Across 847 documented species, Inquisitor Zethmora could predict the exact moment when neural activity would cease, when the subject would transition from useful interrogation target to biological waste requiring disposal. The mathematics were elegant. Apply precisely calibrated neural disruptors at calculated intervals, monitor the cascading organ failures, extract information during the optimal window of consciousness before inevitable termination. It was, Zethmora often reflected, the most refined art in the known galaxy. Subject exhibits standard mammalian responses, announced research specialist Ketfos, their secondary arms dancing across holographic readouts that displayed the human female's vital signs in real time. Cardiac rhythm erratic, but within expected parameters for this species. Neural activity showing predictable stress patterns. Zethmora's 4 eyes focused on the restrained figure. The human, designation Doctor. Kaney Chen, according to the stolen personnel files, hung suspended in the interrogation matrix, various monitoring filaments attached to her skin. Unlike most subjects, she hadn't screamed when the neural disruptors first activated. Instead, she'd looked directly at Zethmora and said, "You know, I've always wondered what alien torture devices looked like." Honestly, kind of disappointed. The comment had been unexpected. "Initiate secondary neural cascade," Zethmora commanded, ignoring the human's earlier remark. The Veltar had broken the will of beings whose intelligence dwarfed most civilizations. One sarcastic biped would present no challenge. The disruptors hummed to a higher frequency. Chen's body convulsed as designed, her nervous system flooding with carefully modulated agony. The readings spiked appropriately, cortisol levels climbing, neural firing patterns fragmenting, cardiovascular stress approaching critical thresholds. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story. Beginning information extraction protocol, Ketfos announced. Subject should be entering optimal compliance window in 3, 2, 1. Are you going to ask me questions, or are we just having an expensive light show? Chen's voice carried remarkably steady, despite the neural interference. Because I have to say, your technique needs work. I once had a root canal that was more unpleasant than this. Zethmora's mandibles clicked in irritation. You will provide the locations of all human research installations in this sector. Will I now? Chen managed what might have been a grin. That's ambitious. What makes you think I know that information? Your personnel designation indicates xenobiology specialization. Your research vessel contained classified navigation data. You possess the required intelligence clearance. You did your homework. Points for preparation. Another convulsion racked her frame as the disruptors cycled through their sequence, but she continued speaking through gritted teeth. Unfortunately, you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about how human information security works. The neural disruptors reached peak intensity. According to every model in Veltar databases, the subject should now be approaching complete psychological breakdown, desperate to trade information for relief. Instead, Chen appeared to be critiquing their methodology. Cardiac arrhythmia increasing, Ketfos reported. Neural activity fragmenting as predicted. Subject approaching terminal threshold. Excellent. Continue extraction protocol. Here's the thing about humans, Chen said, her voice growing weaker but maintaining that infuriating conversational tone. We compartmentalize information differently than you'd expect. Even if I wanted to tell you where our research stations are, which I don't, I literally couldn't. They change locations every 48 hours using randomized jump coordinates that I never had access to in the first place. Zethmora leaned closer. You expect us to believe your species operates with such inefficient security protocols? Inefficient? Chen laughed, though it turned into a cough as her respiratory system struggled against the neural assault. It's brilliant. Can't torture information out of someone who doesn't have it. Can't betray your allies if you never knew where they were going anyway. Humans figured that out centuries ago. The readings showed catastrophic organ failure beginning. Chen's cardiac rhythm became increasingly irregular, her neural patterns dissolving into chaotic static. Textbook progression toward termination. Final extraction window opening, Ketphos announced. Subject has perhaps 90 seconds of coherent consciousness remaining. Last chance, Doctor. Chen. Provide useful intelligence, and we can halt the process. Chen's response came as a whisper. Go. Reproduce. With yourself. Her heart stopped at exactly the moment Zethmora's calculations predicted. Neural activity flatlined within the expected time frame. Cellular death cascade initiated precisely on schedule. The human had expired with typical mammalian efficiency, having provided no useful intelligence whatsoever. Disappointing, Zethmora muttered. Archive the interrogation data and dispose of the remains. Perhaps the next human will prove more cooperative. Shall I summon the disposal drones? Ketphos asked. Standard protocol. 30-minute observation period to confirm complete neural cessation, then incineration. The monitoring equipment registered 0 life signs. Chen's body hung motionless in the restraint matrix, her face slack, eyes closed. Another failed interrogation to catalog alongside thousands of others. The Veltar methodology remained undefeated across species barriers, even if this particular subject had proven annoyingly unproductive. Zethmora departed to review intelligence from other captured humans. Ketphos remained to supervise the disposal process, watching the flat-lined displays with professional detachment. 28 minutes elapsed. The disposal drones were already en route. At 29 minutes and 37 seconds, Doctor. Caney Chen opened her eyes. Well, she said, flexing her fingers against the restraints with renewed vigor. That was refreshing. Ketphos stared at the suddenly active vital signs displays, their secondary arms frozen mid-gesture. The cardiac monitor showed a steady, strong rhythm. Neural activity registered not just as active, but remarkably coherent for someone who had been clinically dead for nearly half an hour. Impossible, Ketphos whispered. Chen turned her head to focus on the stunned alien researcher. You know what your problem is? You assume death works the same way for everyone. She tested the strength of her restraints experimentally. Rookie mistake. The disposal drones arrived precisely on schedule, their mechanical voices announcing readiness to process biological waste. They paused in the doorway, sensors detecting contradictory information. A subject simultaneously registered as deceased and actively speaking. I'd call for backup if I were you, Chen suggested helpfully. This is about to get complicated. Ketphos remained paralyzed, staring at impossible readings that suggested their most fundamental assumptions about biology, death, and the nature of consciousness itself might be catastrophically wrong. Chen smiled. It wasn't a particularly friendly expression. Now then, she said, shall we discuss those research station locations? Because suddenly, I remember a few things I'd be happy to share. The emergency klaxon echoed through Research Bay 7 as Ketphos stumbled backward from the monitoring station, their translator struggling to process rapid-fire Veltar profanity. Within minutes, half the facility's scientific staff crowded around Chen's restraint matrix, chittering and arguing in overlapping dialects, while their instruments insisted on maintaining contradictory readings. Metabolic resurrection is theoretically impossible, declared Chief Researcher Voxhelm, their 8 legs carrying them in agitated circles around the equipment. Complete neural shutdown for 29.62 minutes. No electrical activity, no cellular respiration, no quantum coherence in the brain tissue. And yet, Chen interjected cheerfully, here I am, breathing, thinking, and developing a serious cramp in my left shoulder. Mind loosening these restraints? I promise I won't bite. The assembled scientists exchanged meaningful glances that somehow managed to convey both skepticism and rising panic. Zethmora arrived with characteristic dramatic flair, shoving through the crowd to examine the readings personally. Explain this anomaly immediately, they demanded. Chen stretched as much as the restraints allowed. Which part would you like explained first? The dying, the not dying, or the part where I'm about to make your entire interrogation methodology obsolete? Impossible physiological recovery patterns, Voxhelm muttered, manipulating holographic data streams. No documented precedent across any known species database. From the adjacent holding cells, other human voices began contributing to the conversation. Apparently, Chen's revival had awakened the facility's remaining prisoners. Oh, that's not unusual, called out someone with a distinct orbital colony accent. My grandfather died 3 times during the Proxima campaign. Kept coming back to finish his poker games. Medical impossibility, Zethmora snapped. Medical miracle, corrected another prisoner. Ever hear of hypothermic drowning? Humans have survived underwater for over an hour, clinically dead, then walked away from the hospital 2 days later. A third voice joined in. My sister flatlined for 18 minutes during childbirth. Doctor was filling out death certificates when she sat up and asked for ice chips. The Veltar researchers exchanged increasingly agitated communications in their native language. Chen couldn't understand the words, but their body language suggested mounting alarm. You're discussing primitive folklore, Zethmora insisted. Unsubstantiated medical mythology. Mythology? Chen laughed. We've got documented cases dating back millennia. Lazarus walking out of his tomb, emergency room patients recovering after extended cardiac arrest, people surviving avalanches, drowning, severe trauma, situations that should result in immediate, irreversible death. The ancient texts describe resurrection as divine intervention, added the orbital colonist. Though personally, I always figured it was just humans being too stubborn to stay dead properly. Voxhelm's legs clicked nervously against the floor. Are you suggesting your species possesses supernatural capabilities? Supernatural? Chen shook her head. Nothing supernatural about it. We're just really, really bad at dying efficiently. The lead researcher pulled up comparative biological data on their personal display. Veltar neural tissue expires within 4 minutes of oxygen deprivation. Kethnari subjects survive a maximum of 7 minutes. Zephyrian consciousness terminates at exactly 12 minutes post-cardiac arrest. See? That's your problem right there, Chen explained patiently. You're assuming death follows logical, predictable patterns. Human biology doesn't believe in logic. We've got backup systems for our backup systems, redundant neural pathways, and cellular repair mechanisms that apparently work better when we're technically dead. The mathematics don't support extended consciousness after complete cardiac cessation, Ketphos protested. Mathematics? Another prisoner laughed. Friend, human biology threw mathematics out the window about 6 million years ago. We're walking contradictions held together by stubbornness and spite. Emergency medical protocols on Earth account for this, Cheney continued. Standard resuscitation procedures continue for 30 to 45 minutes after apparent death, sometimes longer. We've learned not to give up on someone just because they've stopped breathing. Zethmora's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. You expect us to believe your medical professionals regularly revive the deceased? Every day, Chen confirmed. Heart attacks, drowning, severe trauma, surgical complications. Humans bounce back from things that would permanently kill most species. It's actually kind of inconvenient from a medical perspective. Hard to determine when someone's actually gone versus just temporarily offline. The research team huddled together, their communication becoming increasingly frantic. Chen caught fragments through her universal translator, discussions of failed methodologies, compromised data, and something that sounded remarkably like existential crisis. This creates significant procedural complications, Voxhelm announced finally. If human subjects cannot be reliably terminated through standard interrogation protocols, then your entire intelligence-gathering operation is fundamentally flawed, Chen finished helpfully. At least where humans are concerned. We could simply increase disruptor intensity, Zethmora suggested. Sure, you could try that, but then you'd be dealing with damaged subjects who might have unreliable memories, assuming the increased intensity actually works, which, given what you've seen so far, seems questionable. One of the other prisoners chimed in again. Plus, there's the psychological factor. Once word gets out that humans can survive your supposedly lethal interrogation techniques, every human in the galaxy is going to know they just need to wait 30 minutes for the cavalry to arrive. Cavalry? Ketfos asked. Figure of speech, Chen explained. Ancient Earth military reference. The point is, your interrogation methods depend on subjects believing death is inevitable. Take away that certainty, and people become remarkably uncooperative. The silence that followed carried the weight of 8 centuries of Veltar interrogation doctrine, crumbling in real time. Their perfectly calibrated, mathematically precise, scientifically elegant torture methodology had just encountered a species too disorganized to cooperate with its own execution. There must be some explanation, Voxhelm insisted desperately. Some biological mechanism we can isolate and counteract. Chen's smile turned predatory. Oh, there absolutely is an explanation, and I'd be happy to discuss it in detail once we negotiate the terms of my consultation fee. Consultation fee? Zethmora's voice rose several octaves. Well, you clearly need expert analysis of human biology to salvage your intelligence operations. I happen to be a xenobiologist with intimate personal experience of your procedures. Seems like a natural business partnership. The assembled Veltar stared at their former victim, who had somehow transformed from interrogation subject into potential contractor in the span of 30 minutes. The mathematical precision of their worldview continued its spectacular collapse. What? Zethmora asked slowly. Would you require as compensation? Chen's grin widened. Let's start with getting me out of these restraints and work our way up from there. The encrypted transmission reached 17 different Veltar intelligence outposts simultaneously, each message carrying the same impossible data. Human subject survived terminal interrogation protocol. Recommend immediate species reassessment. Within 6 standard hours, the response came back in a flood of incredulous communications from across 3 galactic sectors. Commander Dexloth at the Kepler Station facility transmitted first. Attempted enhanced interrogation on human engineer. Subject expired after 14 minutes. Revived spontaneously at 26 minutes. Now claims entire conversation was performance art. The Centauri installation reported similar phenomena. Human diplomat survived 90 minutes of neural cascade. Upon revival, offered to teach us proper torture techniques in exchange for coffee and pastries. From the Outer Rim facilities, 3 human subjects, 3 revival events. One claims to have met his grandmother during the experience and brought back her recipe for something called chicken soup. Zethmora's research team gathered in the facility's primary analysis chamber, holographic displays showing the cascade of reports that continued flooding their communication networks. Each account detailed humans surviving procedures that had never failed to produce definitive termination across hundreds of other species. This cannot represent standard human physiology, Voxhelm insisted, though their confidence had notably deteriorated. Perhaps we captured an unusual subset of their population. 17 separate facilities, Ketfos read from the data streams. 43 individual human subjects. 100% survival rate during procedures with historically perfect lethality records. Chen, now unrestrained and sitting comfortably in what had previously been an interrogation chair, sipped something the Veltar claimed was nutritionally appropriate for human consumption. It tasted like metallic fruit juice, but she'd had worse field rations. "You know what's really going to cook your circuits?" she asked conversationally. "Wait until you realize we've been doing this accidentally across the galaxy for decades." "Elaborate," Zethmora demanded. "Think about it. How many human prisoners have you processed over the years? How many got declared dead, scheduled for disposal, then somehow vanished before incineration?" The research team exchanged glances that managed to convey both horror and dawning comprehension. "We assumed disposal drone malfunctions," Voxhelm whispered. "Equipment failures. Clerical errors." "Nope. We were literally walking away while you weren't looking." Chen took another sip of her alleged nutrition drink. "Probably dozens of humans have escaped your facilities by playing dead better than you realized." Ketfos pulled up historical records, their secondary arms dancing frantically across data interfaces. Anomalous disposal incidents dating back 47 years, 63 documented cases of missing remains. 63 humans you thought you killed who actually just took unauthorized breaks from being dead, Chen confirmed. And now they're out there, spreading word that Veltar interrogation is survivable. The implications hit the research team like a cascading system failure. If humans could survive their methodologies, and if word of that survival was spreading through human networks, then every future interrogation would face subjects who knew death wasn't permanent. "Psychological warfare effectiveness drops to 0, Zethmora muttered. "Worse than 0, Chen corrected, because now you're dealing with humans who know they just need to wait out your procedures. And trust me, humans excel at being stubborn when we know there's an end point." Another wave of transmissions arrived from distant facilities. The pattern was becoming unmistakable. Wherever Veltar forces had attempted human interrogation, subjects were reviving after apparent termination. "The Rigel Complex reports their human subject woke up during the disposal process," Ketfos announced. "Apparently asked the disposal drones for directions to the nearest exit. Proxima Base indicates their subject began critiquing their interrogation technique while still flatlined on monitoring equipment," Voxhelm added, with growing dismay. Chen nodded approvingly. "That sounds like Commander Torres. She's got strong opinions about proper procedure implementation." "You know these individuals?" "Human military networks are smaller than you'd think. Word travels fast, especially when it's something as useful as, 'Hey, alien torture doesn't actually work on us.'" The facility's communication array chimed with an incoming priority message. Zethmora accepted the transmission, and a holographic figure materialized, another Veltar commander, but one whose bearing suggested significantly higher authority. "Inquisitor Zethmora," the figure began without preamble. "Reports indicate you've encountered unprecedented interrogation failures." "Admiral Kethves," Zethmora acknowledged with obvious reluctance. "We have discovered certain complications regarding human physiology. Complications that have apparently spread to 47 separate intelligence operations across 3 sectors. Explain." Chen raised her hand. "Mind if I field this one?" The Admiral's attention focused on her with predatory intensity. You are the anomalous human subject. I'm Dr. Kaney Chen, xenobiologist, and apparently your organization's first consultant on human survival. Biology. She stood up, stretching casually. Here's the situation. Your entire interrogation methodology depends on precise biological predictability. Humans don't do predictable. We're evolutionary accidents held together by redundancy and sheer bloody-mindedness. You claim this represents universal human characteristics? Universal enough that you're going to need a completely new approach if you want useful intelligence from human subjects. Chen gestured towards the ongoing data streams showing similar reports from across the galaxy. Unless, of course, you enjoy conducting interrogations where your subjects treat the whole experience as an inconvenient nap. Admiral Keith Vess processed this information with visible difficulty. The Veltar had built their reputation on methodical, scientific intelligence gathering. The idea that an entire species could simply ignore their procedures violated fundamental assumptions about biological vulnerability. Recommendations? The Admiral asked finally. Chen smiled. Well, you could try asking nicely. Humans respond surprisingly well to basic courtesy, comfortable accommodations, and decent food. Much better than we respond to torture, as it turns out. That suggestion lacks the precision our methodology requires. Your methodology just failed catastrophically against an entire species, Chen pointed out. Maybe it's time to consider that precision isn't as universally applicable as you assumed. The Admiral's image flickered as they processed reports continuing to stream in from facilities across their operational network. Each transmission painted the same picture: human subjects surviving impossible procedures, then treating their survival as unremarkable. This intelligence failure represents an existential threat to our operational effectiveness, Admiral Kethaves announced grimly. Only if you keep trying to use the wrong tools for the job, Chen replied. But I've got some thoughts on alternative approaches, if you're interested in consulting services. The silence that followed carried the weight of an entire intelligence apparatus, realizing that their most fundamental assumptions about life, death, and information extraction might be spectacularly wrong. What, the Admiral asked slowly, would these consulting services entail? 3 days later, Chen found herself in the unprecedented position of lecturing a room full of the galaxy's most feared interrogation specialists. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same beings who had strapped her to a torture device now hung on her every word, frantically taking notes as she explained why their perfect system had crumbled. The fundamental issue, she began, gesturing at a holographic display showing comparative biological data, is that you've built your entire methodology around the assumption that death is binary, alive or dead, on or off, 1 or 0. Admiral Kethaves leaned forward from their position at the conference table. This assumption has proven accurate across 847 documented species. Right, but humans didn't get the memo. Chen manipulated the display to show human cardiac arrest statistics. We exist in this bizarre gray area between functional and catastrophic failure. Our brains keep working for minutes after our hearts stop. Our cells can survive extended periods without oxygen. Our nervous systems have backup pathways that activate during trauma. Zethmora clicked their mandibles skeptically. You describe your species as fundamentally defective. Defective? We prefer creatively engineered by natural selection's drunk cousin. Chen pulled up evolutionary timelines. Humans developed on a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill us in increasingly creative ways. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, predators, diseases, climate shifts. We survived because we became really good at not staying dead when something tried to kill us. The assembled Veltar exchanged communications in their native language. Chen caught fragments through her translator, discussions of biological anomalies, evolutionary impossibilities, and what sounded like professional despair. Your interrogation techniques work brilliantly on species that die efficiently, Chen continued. Clean neural shutdown, predictable organ failure, tidy biological conclusions. But humans? We're held together by evolutionary duct tape and cellular stubbornness. She activated another display showing brain scan comparisons. Veltar neural activity terminates within microseconds of cardiac arrest. Very clean, very predictable. Human brains? They keep firing randomly for 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes longer. We call it dying badly from a medical perspective. This extended neural activity explains the survival phenomenon, Voxhelm asked. Partly. But it gets better. Chen's smile carried the satisfaction of someone about to deliver a particularly devastating punchline. Human cells have this quirky habit of going into what we call hibernation mode during extreme trauma. Metabolism slows to almost nothing, oxygen requirements drop dramatically, and cellular repair systems actually work more efficiently. Impossible, Admiral Keithves protested. Our medical analyses show complete cellular death. Your analyses measure cellular activity based on normal metabolic rates, Chen explained patiently. Human cells during crisis don't follow normal anything. They're basically playing dead at the molecular level until conditions improve. The room fell silent, except for the ambient hum of life support systems. The implications were becoming clear. The Veltar hadn't encountered an advanced species with supernatural abilities. They'd run headfirst into a biological train wreck that was too disorganized to die properly. Furthermore, Chen continued, warming to her theme, human consciousness doesn't shut down linearly like other species. We've got distributed processing, redundant memory systems, and what our neuroscientists call backup awareness protocols that kick in during extreme stress. She pulled up historical medical data from Earth. Emergency room physicians have known for centuries that humans can survive extended clinical death. The record holder was underwater for over 2 hours, clinically dead for 43 minutes, and walked out of the hospital with minor brain damage. Your species considers this normal? Ketvos asked in apparent horror. Normal enough that it's covered in basic medical training. We've got entire protocols built around the assumption that dead humans might not be permanently dead. Chen shrugged. It's actually kind of annoying from a healthcare perspective. Hard to declare someone deceased when they might just be taking an extended break from breathing. Admiral Keithves processed this information with visible difficulty. These biological irregularities render our interrogation methodology completely ineffective. Against humans, yes, your techniques are scientifically elegant and mathematically precise, which is exactly why they don't work on us. Chen gestured broadly. You've created the perfect system for breaking species that cooperate with logical biological processes. Humans are fundamentally illogical. Recommend alternative approaches, the Admiral commanded. Well, you could try treating us decently and asking nicely. Most humans are surprisingly cooperative when you're not actively trying to kill them. Chen paused thoughtfully. Revolutionary concept, I know. The silence that followed carried 8 centuries of Veltar interrogation doctrine, dissolving into irrelevance. Their mathematically perfect torture methodology, refined across countless species, calibrated to extract information with scientific precision, had been defeated by biological chaos and evolutionary randomness. There's a deeper irony here, Chen added, apparently unable to resist twisting the knife. You chose humans as targets because we seemed primitive and vulnerable. Soft tissue, basic technology, predictable mammalian biology. The perfect subjects for your refined techniques. Correct, Admiral Keithves acknowledged reluctantly. But our apparent vulnerability is exactly what makes us impossible to break systematically. We're too disorganized to die on schedule, too stubborn to stay dead when we do die, and too biologically chaotic to respond predictably to scientific torture. She stood up, stretching casually. You wanted to exploit human weakness, but it turns out our weakness is actually our strength. We're so bad at being efficiently victimized that we accidentally became unvictimizable. The assembled Veltar stared at their former prisoner, now consultant, who had somehow transformed their greatest operational strength into their most catastrophic weakness, simply by refusing to die properly. In conclusion, Chen announced with obvious satisfaction, congratulations. You've just discovered that the galaxy's most primitive species is also its most torture-resistant, entirely by accident. Your perfect system met our imperfect biology, and imperfect won. The meeting dissolved into frantic communications as the Veltar struggled to process the complete collapse of their intelligence-gathering methodology. Their scientific precision had been undone by human inefficiency, their mathematical elegance defeated by evolutionary randomness. Chen collected her consultation fee and departed, leaving behind a room full of interrogation specialists who had just learned that sometimes the most sophisticated systems fail, not because they're imperfect, but because they're too perfect for the beautifully chaotic reality they're trying to control. Outside the facility, she paused to look up at the stars, each one potentially harboring Veltar operations that would soon discover their methods were useless against humanity's most unexpected superpower, being too disorganized to die efficiently. It was, she reflected, probably the most human way possible to accidentally conquer the galaxy's most feared intelligence network.